today with Sam Brown. He is a VP for Research and a research professor at Intermountain Health, a professor of medicine at University of Utah. And he also publishes in biomedicine, ethics, intellectual history, and theology. So thanks for being here, Sam.
Glad to be with you, Jenny.
Thank you. Today we're talking about Alma 39 to 42, and we're looking at an artwork by Annie Henry Nader. It's called Between Heaven and Earth. You can see it right here. And this is from 2014. It's a mixed media piece. Sam, can you tell us a little bit about how this piece relates to the scriptures in Alma?
That's a good question. 39 to 42 is that encounter between Alma and Corianton, where Alma's the established patriarch, and Corianton is supposed to be on his mission. They ended up having sex with a woman and maybe shacking up with her. And
okay.
Alma's a little, it's the mission president moment that no one wants to have, and Alma's embarrassed and sad and frightened. And interestingly, you can wonder about the dynamics, father and son, with Alma then using this as a time for theological and philological reflections on the word restoration and justice. But so it's this complicated context for ultimately a fairly intense depiction in stages, admittedly, confusing a little bit about the stages of people coming spirit back to body and then judgment and consignment to their final state.
Right.
But ultimately it's trying to talk about the fact that you reap what you sow. And then there's Alma does this little turn with restoration, meaning not restoration to your primordial purity, which others might have thought, but restoration meaning that after you've been dead for some period of time, the person you were as a living person will be restored to you. And if that's a good person, you'll be restored to that goodness. If you're a bad person, restored to that badness. So it's theologically actually sort of complicated and interesting. So what Nader does with this is it looks to me like probably the spirits and bodies have been reunited at this point.
Okay.
So they're the then enfleshed dead, and they're at that moment of restoration, which Alma says means being who you have most recently been, forward into the afterlife. But I feel like Nader has some fun. I don't know whether she was specifically engaging the Great Divorce, C.S. Lewis's book on Heaven and Hell. Yeah. But you get a sense that the people who are being restored to the misery that they planted while they were alive are deciding they'd like to stay that way. In Lewis's Great Divorce, he depicts hell as a place you choose to stay.
Right.
And as soon as you don't want to be in hell anymore, you leave hell. That's the Great Divorce imagery. And I thought at the bottom of that, there's that circular compass around the segregating, resurrected dead in the process of restoration. And I felt like a couple of the figures at the bottom were in that Lewisian moment of deciding, do I stay or do I not? Now that Lewis is inconsistent, at least at a surface reading, with Alma's instruction of Corianton. I should acknowledge that. Alma's playing a pretty hard line. And you can imagine that that's an attempt to communicate an eternal truth in a rhetoric that's relevant to the precise moment. Okay. And the precise moment is he thinks he can salvage his son by coming down hard. Now, some sons respond to that, most don't, but some do. So it's possible that Alma is accentuating rhetorically this notion of permanence, even here in mortality, more than he might in another context, because of his worry about Corianton. And I think Nader, maybe putting words into her mouth or words out of her brush, but if she is taking that Lewis Great Divorce pivot, then she's looking at another rhetorical angle, which you might use in someone a little less hard of heart and a little more broken. Thinking about that possibility that you choose to stay in hell. So it resonates with me at some level.
Yeah, so I noticed that too, that there's the figures at the lower part of the circle that are facing away from the viewer, so away from us, and then there are figures more in light, including Christ here at the center, who are looking out towards us. So there's sort of this play between dark and light and coming and going.
Yeah.
And then also the circle within the square. So can you talk a little bit about these ideas of like opposition or complementarity or?
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about this recently, this notion of, some people call them polarities or dualisms or binarities or polarities, whatever. But there's a sense of yin and yang, of male and female, of living and dead. There are in the universe modes of interacting and groups or types that do that interacting, and they're related in some important way. Even though they look like they're the opposites of each other, they're actually related. And there's that complementarity, and you can see that there's a complementarity of living and dead in the restoration that as is true of few other religious traditions, the living and the dead are intercalated into each other's lives in the restoration. And I think that's an important consideration. And there are other complementarities that feel more like those old school antagonisms, righteousness and wickedness.
Sure,
right? And I don't want to go too far. I'm not trying to veer off the path by any stretch. So there will be some complementarities but even the righteousness and wickedness, I just think about Lehi's deathbed sermon. That if there is no opposition, there is no growth. So is there a role for wickedness? Maybe not ideal state for us to be wicked, of course. Alma's hammering that down with Korean.
Yeah.
But is there something about our being enmeshed in a world that has light and dark, righteousness and wickedness, that is a source of growth? There is a kind of healing complementarity in those. And I wonder whether, as Nader plays with those contrasts that can come into contact with each other, you get this possibility of, and we think about this in the spirit world preaching, you get this possibility of maybe the angels can talk to the devils and maybe even influence them for the better.
Yeah.
Could we preach to the devil?
Yeah, that's interesting. And I see too, coming out of this, at the top, the light breaks through the border.
Yeah, that's what made me choose this painting to talk about. I went back and with a friend explored her other Nader's other paintings. It turns out she likes to do this.
Okay.
She likes to paint a border and then have the picture framed inside the painted border break through. But that's okay.
That's fine. I think it speaks to that idea of growth and expansion.
Well, and breaking things.
Breaking.
I think there is a breaking
boundaries and borders.
Time
and space.
And there is a sense in which what breaks the simple rules is Jesus. Jesus and light, the light of Christ. That's what really breaks things and break things for the better. I think about the Easter notion that the world brought, and this is Tom Wright, is really eloquent in this area, but you think about Good Friday and the weekend between Good Friday and Easter as a time when the world has amassed all of its angry power and expended all of its angry power against Jesus and ultimately failed. That Jesus broke the world. And then there's that Leonard Cohen, that the cracks are what lets the light in. Right? The cracks that let the God in. So I love that. That's what really drew me to the image. Because at first I was looking at it and trying to decide, how is this super different from a million other judgment paintings?
Right.
But I love that image of the life, the light, and the life breaking out of that. And that I think plays to that uncertainty that I talked about with Alma's rhetorical posture to Corianton in that circumstance, and possibly another rhetorical posture in another setting to another audience. lives that would help people to come to Christ. And I think about that spark of possibility that comes in Jesus' ability to break things.
Yeah.
That holds out that possibility that you try hard and you fail, and there is light left for you at the end as well.
Oh, I love those thoughts. Thank you. Thanks
Jenny.
for visiting with us today.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.